From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, February the 15th, 2025. We're doing the show today with Norm Ryder and Mehdi Najari. For me, the basic idea of this show is not the topics of news that happen every week, whatever they may be, but the underlying theme that in Canada, we really have largely lost our democracy. And so we, the Canadian people, are increasingly irrelevant in terms of how our country is being run. So, for example, the housing crisis and the healthcare crisis. I mean, this is stuff we don't vote for, but it happens. And the reason it happens is not because it has to happen, but instead because the people who really run Canada, the corporate sector and the 0.01%, this is what they want. They, a healthcare system where they are taking billions and billions in profit is good for them, while, millions of Canadians can't get a family doctor or have to wait 15 hours in the emergency ward because the system is screwed up, right? This isn't the way it has to be, but it is the way it is. So I want to talk, and the same is true of the media. The media, which I used to think was our free press, is really just a corporate propaganda machine more than anything else. And that includes the CBC. So I want to talk a little bit about income equality and the impacts that has on our society. It's something I never thought about. Somebody showed me a video about this. A book had been written called The Spirit Level. The spirit level is something a carpenter would use to see if something is level. And so this book was called The Spirit Level, and it's about the level of equality of income in a country. And what the book said is that so many different things are impacted by how equal the income in a society is. So, for example, things like trust, the trust that people have in others, life expectancy, infant mortality, mental health, education, violence, imprisonment, literacy, and social mobility, things like that, they all are better in a nation where the incomes are more equal. And yet here in Canada, we seem to be moving in completely the other direction. It's becoming more and more unequal. And again, this is something we never voted on. Did we ever have the chance to vote on? Yes, we want to see record bank profits, even though that means a lot of people are going to be living in poverty. Millions of Canadians will be living in poverty, but we want the banks to make record profits. These are the kinds of things that we're never asked about, but they happen because the banks are making record profits and more people are falling through the cracks at the bottom. So the idea of income equality is very important, but it's something we never talk about. Right? It's never the headline news. Let's have more income equality. Let's look at our tax structure. Let's look at the way wealth is distributed in our country. We never go there. They always have us somewhere else. And it turns out that in a society where income is more equal, even the rich are happier. Right? They have less money and they have less wealth, but they're happier because they're living in a better society. And we can do this. So it's something that we should be talking about. I read, I looked into this a bit over the last day or two. So the top 1% of Canadians own 26% of the wealth, while millions of Canadians are living in poverty. Our tax system is getting more regressive, which means that the poor pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than the rich. It used to be very different. But over the decades, the people who run Canada and control our political parties, they've changed our tax system to make it worse and worse for most of us, but better and better for those at the top. And Oxfam says one new billionaire is created in Canada every 12 weeks, while 3.8 million Canadians live in poverty. And I mean, the United States, it turns out, is among the worst, maybe the worst. And Northern European countries tend to be the best in terms of this income equality thing. It's something we should be talking about. It's something that if we want to do, we should be able to do it. But, as I said to begin this, we, the Canadian public, are largely irrelevant, and it doesn't matter what we want. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, or Mehdi, if you want to comment on that, and then Norm will move into something else.
No, not really. Maybe later.
Okay. Norm, you were going to talk a little bit about a word that nobody thought of as little as a month ago, but now it's number one on the hit parade: tariffs.
Well, actually, I was going to, in a sense, tie that into what you were talking about, income inequality. It's not just in a country, a province, it's globally we've got a problem with this income or asset inequality, I guess. And Trump's solution seems to be that he's going to charge tariffs on everyone, which is going to make matters worse. That a little bit of a history lesson here, that a lot of people, when they talk about the Great Depression in the 1930s, we talk about how the stock market crash started it and it was all because of that. That's not really correct. That, yes, the stock market did crash. They do that fairly regularly, actually. The big problem was when Herbert Hoover brought in a bunch of tariffs to protect the U.S. economy more, which in turn caused, you can take this out of the headlines now, countermeasures from the other countries, which of course caused the U.S. to bring in more tariffs and boost it. And that really, the slowing of the global economy, it slowed to about 65%, probably more because of the tariffs being brought in. And that caused so much damage, it didn't right itself, I guess you could say, until after the Second World War, when you've got all these conferences and new organizations set up, that the U.S. at that time, well, the World Trade Organization started, but the U.S. at that time decided they were going to have individual tariff agreements with various countries, which NAFTA, or the United States, Mexico, Canada agreements, an example of that type of thing. But now Trump doesn't seem to want to abide by those agreements. He wants to pull more of the assets into the States, and that's going to create more of a problem globally of allocation of assets. And I can't see it being anything other than a total collapse.
Norm, can I ask, when did you said President Hoover brought in tariffs?
1930.
1930.
Immediately on the heels of the stock market crash.
Okay.
And he was president until, well, technically 1933, but the end of 1932. And then, Roosevelt took over, and so much damage had been done to the economy that it couldn't, the global economy, it could not be corrected quickly. And it literally, shall we say, it had to wait until after the Second World War before it could be addressed properly. And was working quite well when, at that point. The other thing with tariffs is that they are not intended to be, and never were intended to be, a political punishment on different countries, whereas that's what we're getting involved in now. Actually, tariffs, if you take it back, I think with the States, definitely in Canada, that when our Constitution or DNA Act was written, that was the way the federal government would raise money. Income tax, of course, had nothing to do with it. And I think really it boils down to, you can either have tariffs, which is a way of raising money from the people. Don't ever forget, they're the people in the country are the ones that are paying the tariffs, and or the income tax. But you can't have both of them because they conflict. They're at cross purpose with each other, and will basically take too much money out of the economy from the working people, so the government can waste it, which, or at least that's what it feels like. They waste a lot of it, and so they have to raise the tariffs and the taxes to keep covering it, and that is what's crashing the global economy.
Mehdi, any comment?
I am not qualified to talk about this issue. I don't have that much background, but one thing is that mostly is because of there is no tax on wealth making, and that was the cause of many crashes in past. And in 1930s, we saw millions of Americans without job and poor, while there was a rich class that enjoy their lives, and nothing happened to them. That's why Mr. Roosevelt has to bring income tax and create more equality in income distribution, in wealth distribution. So those are all helping. And as you know, for example, in 1990s, they gave huge tax cut to the corporations. They reduced their corporate tax level from around 28% to 15% and less, 21% and less. And then they had to have austerity program, which is cutting the social expenditure, and created a huge number of homelessness. And this is a continuation.
Yes, all very true. All very true. Norm, I'll just make the comment about tariffs that I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't think tariffs, but again, like Mehdi, I don't know a lot about it, but let's both look into this more deeply. And
well, I was going to say that tariffs are a consumption tax, which essentially is a tax on the rich more than on the poor. And this is why, I mean, it's got to be balanced. There's no taxation per system that's going to be perfect. I mean, that's the first thing I think we all have to admit. There'll be flaws with every one of them.
Mehdi, you were going to talk a little bit about I think the freedom of information situation here in British Columbia. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this means how we get information from our provincial government.
Yeah, I came to BC in late 1980s, 1987. And it was very easy to do some research and go get information. Usually I would go to Ministry of Forest or Ministry of Environment and ask for information. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I would get the information. No problem. Nobody asked who I am, why I need the information, and so on and so forth. But then in 1992, NDP government, with the big, huge fanfare, brought this legislation about Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
And that was here in British Columbia.
Here in British Columbia. And that was pushed by Mr. Mary Rankin, at that time working for provincial government, for NDP government. He wasn't an MP or MLA. He later became an MP and MLA. And then after they brought this, they created a huge bureaucracy. Every department have to have a section for freedom of information officers, you know. And we have to apply, tell who we are and what kind of information we are looking for. And it takes them 30 days to respond, and they could extend that too. after brought this legislation, I could not get much information anymore.
Yeah.
Because the big brothers, first of all, knew who is asking, because information in the hands of who? Some people get the information and they cannot do much about it. And if they are people that known information in their hand is dangerous, then they can prevent them to get the information and make excuses. And that has happened many, many times with me, you know.
And not only with you, it's widespread. If you
With lots of people. And then they want to also charge for the information. These are public information, you know, instead of, if they really want, because at the time when they brought this legislation, they claimed that we are going to make information easily available to people. And nobody can prevent people to know those information, except when it's come to the so-called privacy. But then I could not get any information on forestry, on environmental issues, on political issues. I could not get any information. So within a year, we were talking about this. I remember, Jack, you and me were talking about it. And I said, this is the Freedom from Information Act,
yes,
not Freedom of Information Act.
yes.
And this is what they have done. For example, in municipal affairs, I go and ask for a traffic study that they have done for this huge development. You have to go and apply for freedom of information. Why? A simple traffic study. Why are we going through this nonsense?
Mehdi, you are absolutely right. I mean, these people are supposed to work for us. But somehow they've taken control of all the information, and they'll give it to us, the citizens, if they think it's okay, and they have the power to do that. It's ridiculous.
It's just because after a few months, for example, can I give you an example about this?
Yes.
Our municipality was giving grants for $1,600, $800, and $350 to people to purchase electric bike. And it was based on first come, first served. And I had problem with that because $1,600 is a huge amount of money, public money you are giving to people based on first come, first served. Why not having a lottery and let people put their name down, and then at the end, after a month of gathering the names, you may have a lottery and people have equal chance. The first come, first serve, and only people that know about it, you know, and maybe their friends getting these $1,600 grant. So the first round of this $1,600 grant, I applied 2 days later, and then they say, oh, it's over. The 1,600 grant were already given to people. And I made a complaint. So what's happened? In the second round, they call me and say, now you come and apply fast to get it. So they were selecting exactly what I was saying they were doing, you know. And I got the grant, I got the 1,600. I wanted to go through the process to see what's happening here. You know, is this is legitimate or not? Which in my mind is illegitimate.
And this was to get a $1,600 grant from the city government to buy an electric bike or to help you buy. Yeah.
So I got it, and then I went through the whole process. You have to purchase it. I purchased it, and after that, I came back to them, and I said, "Listen, this process stinks to high heaven. You inform me." Not other people in this municipality, so I could get it to shut me down because I complained. I am willing to get the 1,600 if you do it right. If you accept that this is a wrong process, if you accept that we have to provide equal opportunity for all citizens to get this grant, but no, they don't want. So this is the process. So I try to get the name of the people that they gave these $1,600 grants for first in the first round and second round, and they said, "Oh, we cannot give it to you because it's a protection of privacy." This is nonsense. if you get public money, there is no protection of privacy. We just want to know who got these grants. And I was one of them. But no, you cannot get it. So that's first part, freedom of information. And with the second part, the Protection of Privacy Act, they, they use that to prevent any information given to people. And you don't know if they are correct in protecting privacy or not. And meanwhile, in this day and age, nobody has privacy anymore. With the cell phone, with the internet, there is no privacy. The big brother know everything about us.
Betty, thank you very much. I think I have to agree with both. It is pathetic that that we can't get information. It's different in other places. For example, I think Washington State, it's very public, the information. Our own government, who do they think they are? But they have the power, and that's the way they treat us.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
If they want really provide information to public easily, they can just put few categories the information that they can withhold. The rest of it should be automatically in the internet, so people have their access without them requesting for those information, and without the big brother know who is requesting for what kind of information. It's none of their business what I am asking for. If it should be available, it should be available.
Norm, any?
Well, just in the sense that I've got a good example locally of what's going on in how they want to keep the information away from the people. There's a development that is going in, which is wrongly thought out, I guess you could say. A lot of opposition to it. There was a meeting on Monday at council to move it ahead to the public hearing stage, which frankly is not ready to go there, in my opinion. But I wrote a letter into council with a concern about it, but they wouldn't, it was not in the publicly available agenda. It's a game that they seem to want to be doing, putting people in silos so that they don't know what people's concerns are. And that information goes to council should be publicly available. And I find my municipality is probably one of the worst for trying to hold back on information that you got to fight with them to get anything. I'm not even sure that they'll allow me to know the name of the mayor without going through an FOI request now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mehdi and Norm. And Norm, you were going to talk about, again, a local issue which ties into both housing and democracy, I think.
It does, and well, it ties into Mehdi's freedom of information, the public information from the municipalities, that they are ignoring shall we say, the public. And I think you can find this going on. We can change the words around a little bit in virtually every municipality, that the developer comes ahead, they want to make a change in the official community plan, which was made just literally days before, but they're different. They push that through. I would say in general, people aren't against this particular housing development in broad strokes, just the way it's being done and what's there. And it's in an area that was pegged for single family housing because it's too far out of the village center for easy access in and out. But for some reason, the developers, the ear of the council, and it's being pushed forward. Now, I've seen this in other municipalities as well, that the people's will is not really listened to. And the will I'm referring to in the terms of the OCP or the official community plan, that if we're told it's a living document, but it's only a flexible living document if the large developers are changing it. If I wanted to open up a corner store on this, I'd have a real fight to get the OCP changed. So it's a one-sided democracy for the developers. It seems to be getting worse all the time.
Yeah. Mehdi?
This is happening all over. It's not just central Saanich, and it's happening all over. And what has happened during the pandemic, when they told everybody to go home and not show up, they had many meetings with the development industry lobby, the Urban Development Institute, and they captured our municipal and provincial government and pushing their development agenda against the public interest. They don't care. Many of these councillors, they don't care if this development is being opposed by the people of Saanich or Central Saanich or other municipalities. They just are pushing it through in the name of housing crisis. And none of these housing that they are building, majority of them are not affordable. So they are creating a new generation of rent slaves. They are going to put the rent very high, and people have to pay 30, 40, 50% of their income for rent and never be a homeowner. They are creating these high prices for the homes and the rent artificially. And the government, especially the provincial government here in BC, the NDP government, is totally in the cahoot with them. And they are helping the development interest, not the public interest. Because if they wanted to provide people with affordable housing, they know what to do. They have to build on public land publicly, like in 1960s and 70s, and they refuse to do that. And the only reason is to maximize the profit of the developers. One last thing. If people want to know more about this, at least in our area, they could go to CRD Watch and look at the site, because there is lots of information was put on by Sasha Eisert about the connection between the development lobby and our municipal government and our provincial government.
Norm, any last
Yeah, I
comment?
was just going to say thank you, Mehdi, for extending what I was getting at. That's exactly, and you can choose any municipality you want and say virtually the same words.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of the corporate media in Canada. And what you guys were just saying is one example of that, because the corporate media will not make an issue out of this fact that, our city governments have been taken from us, as well as our provincial and the federal government. I mean, they're gone. We, the citizenry, are largely irrelevant. And that's something the media should be talking about. But why would the media be talking about it when it's owned by the very people that benefit from having taken over our governments, which now work for them? So if we look at, the big media in Canada, the Globe and Mail, which used to be big for decades. Newspapers aren't big anymore, but a lot of people still follow the Globe and Mail. It's owned by the Thompson family, which is Canada's richest family. And I thought for years, when I read the Globe and Mail, I was getting, great information. And I was, but it was great information presented to me from the point of view of Canada's wealthiest people. So why would I trust it? Why would I think that it's working for me? Another example of the corporate media is Quebecor, which is the corporation in Quebec. It must own, I would say, half of all the television, half of the radio, half of the newspapers in the entire province of Quebec. Plus they're in book publishing and music. This company, it's called Quebecor, and that's exactly what it is, right? It controls the flow of information within the province of Quebec to a large extent. And CTV or Bell Media is another example of this. Bell Media owns the entire CTV network and much, much more. Plus, it owns about 20 radio stations across Canada. It used to own more, but now they buy and sell them. And Bell Media is owned by another corporation called BCE, which is, I think, Bell Canada Enterprise, something like that. The chairman of the board of BCE is the former chief executive officer of Canada's biggest bank, right, the Royal Bank. So CTV is basically run by the banksters, and yet we trust and believe with the news that is told to us every day and every night by CTV. I would say the whole thing about corporate journalism in Canada is based on a big lie. And I would say that all the corporate journalists in Canada are liars in this respect, because the pretense is that they work for us. I mean, they're always on the radio, television, newspapers. It's always, we work for you and we're giving you the news and you can trust us. But they don't work for us. They work for some of the biggest corporations in the country. And the boards of directors of those corporations are tied into all the other corporations in our country. So what we largely think of as a free press, which I thought of for most of my life as a free press here in Canada, and a great free press, is really nothing more than a corporate propaganda machine that is very powerful. And it's powerful as long as we trust it. If we stop believing it, because the only truth allowed in the corporate media is the corporate truth. And I mean, I grew up through the Vietnam War, right? And I completely believed that America was in there fighting for truth and honor and justice and democracy, because that's what was told me. And it's been the same ever since. Somewhere along the line, I came to see that it was all a lie. So when they talk, for example, about foreign interference, how big is that as a story these days? But the fact of the matter, foreign interference in our democracy, well, we have no democracy. We're completely controlled by the corporations. And so their media, instead of ever talking about corporate control of our governments and corporate control of our democracy, they tell us, yeah, the real enemy is Russia and China and Iran and everybody else, right? We can't believe them. It is very dangerous for us to believe the media. And I'll leave it at that, unless somebody else has a comment.
Well, Jack, I've got a couple of comments there that, well, I too was brought up during the Vietnam War era. And I can remember a high school teacher wanted to stage a debate among the students and teachers what a debate is and the rest of that discussion. And the topic they chose was the Vietnam War. Well, it was easy to get students that were against the war. So I finally ended up, because no one wanted to take the other side, I took the other side to try and justify the war. To cut it short, I lost the debate. Can you guess why? But anyways, the other thing is the Globe and Mail. Well, I was looking at the Globe and Mail this morning, and it did have something quite important, especially with the way Trump is pushing things with the tariff and how it's getting Canadians worked up. And we're recording this on Flag Day in Canada. Now, it's something most of us really don't think about very often. It's the 60th anniversary, February 15th, of when the current Canadian flag was unveiled to the public. So for that type of thing, yes, I guess the media is good. I have to confess, I didn't read the article. I think I can remember enough of the story of when the flag came in, etc. But for that type of thing, the media is good. But when it gets into the meat of things that we really need to understand, the corporate media is just missing totally.
Mehdi?
It's not surprising. It's owned by the big business, and it's in the service of big business. For example, here right now, we were talking about the development industry and their lobby, and you don't hear much about the influence of the development industry in our municipal government. And there is nothing in the media to talk about it. For example, here in Victoria, Times Colonist is a member of the Urban Development Institute. So they are not going to criticize something that they are supporting, and is a member of it, you know.
And the Times Colonist is also owned by a corporation. This is our daily newspaper here in Victoria, the Times Colonist. Used to be very important, not so much anymore. But it's owned by a corporation that's deeply tied into the oil and gas industry. So on environmental issues, you know, good luck. We're going to run through a few news issues now. Things that are current in the national or local news. Mine is U.S. Vice President Vance's recent speech. Today is the 15th. He gave this speech just a day or two ago in Munich, Germany, a big international conference of European leaders. And I'm sure they came out of that meeting absolutely in a state of shock. Because what U.S. Vice President Vance, I mean, speaking for Donald Trump, he said, I think he said that Russia is not the threat to Europe, which I would agree with. He said, you are the threat to Europe, pointing at the various government officials that were there. And I think what he said is they were destroying their countries by letting in lots of immigrants, and then working together, these various governments in Europe, to prevent more right-wing parties that are becoming popular from participating in the democracy. What he never mentioned was, you know, the flow of immigration into Germany. And the biggest flow in the last few years has been from Ukraine, over 1 million people. But the flow of immigration into Germany has caused problems there. But what's never talked about is, why is this flow of immigrants coming into Germany and other European countries? It's because the United States has destroyed nation after nation after nation in the Middle East and created millions of refugees. And a lot of them have gone into surrounding countries, but a lot of them have gone into Europe. And if the United States had not done this, they destroyed Afghanistan, they destroyed Iraq, they destroyed Libya, they destroyed Syria. They played a role in the destruction of Yemen and Somalia. I mean, millions of people, and now Gaza. It's crazy. Underlying it all is, I think Europe for 20 years has, I think, largely led in, especially environmental standards, I think certainly better than us, and worker rights, again, better than us. And I think the power structure was tired of that. They don't want people able to defend themselves. So they're taking out Germany. I mean, they're taking out Europe, just like they're taking out North America. That's my bottom line. Any comments? You may think I'm completely crazy.
I mean, since Mr. Trump have came to power, it's just making a lots of noise and creating a lots of waves, but not much substance behind, you know. I mean, the fact that he said we should go and capture Greenland for its rare minerals, or make Canada, annex Canada to United States, or go take back Panama Canal, all these are lots of noise. But let's see what they really do. In terms of the immigrants, these are the wars that United States created. In Syria, for example, in Ukraine, it was the United States that created the coup in 2014 and brought a bunch of fascists and neo-Nazis into power in Ukraine. And then they, by the year 2022, when Russia was forced to defend the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, they came and intervene. They claimed that there is no Nazis in in Ukraine, and there is the fact is facts. And United States supported these neo-Nazis and created the war with Russia, and now they are saying something, singing from a different tune. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it's interesting if really United States stop warmongering in Eastern Europe and stop warmongering in Middle East. Believe me, nobody is gonna be immigrant. People like to live in their own country of their birth. They don't want to go to Europe to be discriminated against. And all this violence you see from these immigrants, most of these people are young people. They are being manipulated by security services of this country to create this violence, for example, going at attacking people with knife and so on and so forth. There are most of these so-called terrorists are controlled by the security services of the West. We saw the guy that was head of the Al-Qaeda and ISIS suddenly and had $10 million on his head, suddenly become the president of the Syria, and all these Western politicians go and shake hands with him.
Yes.
So who is controlling who?
Yes.
So please stop bothering people in Middle East, in Eastern Europe. Let us live in peace and harmony, and none of us will immigrate to West if you let us just live in peace.
Norm?
I was just going to say that Canada plays a bigger part in what's going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East, than we realize. That the U.S. needs our aluminum, our steel, which they're going to put tariffs on, our iron ore, our energy. Now, those are probably three of the main components that you need if you are going to fight a war. And we have to start asking, how much of our resources are being left on the battlefields in Ukraine, in the Middle East, that if Canada withheld their resources from being used as war materials, which is historically quite an acceptable thing to withhold resources because they're war material, if we withheld them, how much would the bully of the U.S. Be doing in these places? It'd go a long ways towards world peace, and that's something Canada can do overnight.
Final thing, I want to talk a little bit about Robert Kennedy being made the Secretary in the United States of Health and Human Services, on a theme of "Make America Healthy Again." I think everybody should keep an eye on that. I think we're going to see some remarkable and interesting things from Robert Kennedy. A lot of negative things have been said about him, especially over the past couple of years. But watch what he says, not what other people say he says, and watch what he does on this Make America Healthy Again thing. And I hope it spreads into Canada too, because I just read today, we all have plastic in our brains, right? We all have plastic in our brains. The story said, if you take a plastic spoon and look at that is the amount of plastic in our brain today for the average 40 or 50-year-old person. And it's 0.5% of the weight of our brain is now plastic. So I think Kennedy wants to get rid of that kind of stuff if it's possible to do that. I mean, these people should be in prison, the people who've done this to us, and yet it's not even an issue.
I've been looking at Kennedy, that what I think he wants to do, I agree with you, it could be great, and he's going to get a few wins coming out the gate first, but are they going to let him do what he wants to do? And I, shall we say, have quite a bit of concern there that very quickly he's going to be sort of shuffled off into the corner if he stays in cabinet. There's no reason Trump can remove him anytime he wants. And as much as I think Kennedy is an honorable person trying to do what is right, I'm not sure they're going to let him do it in the end.
Betty?
It's it's some hopeful sign, but again we have to wait. There is a lots of noise. For example, you talk about the. I promise you, there will be no tariff on Canadian resources. None. This is all playing a game. You know, there will be no. So I don't know what Mr. Kennedy is going to do or not do. Let's see if what he has promised, the so-called MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, happened, and stop pharmaceutical from poisoning people, stop the chemical company through the pesticides, use of pesticides destroying our life and what we eat and making us sick, and all these children diseases that is coming up with the allergies and so on and so forth, is all because of the way we live and what we are eating right now, full of chemicals. With the plastic in our brain is because we are consuming that plastic through tea bags and many other things we use.
Everything, yeah.
So if he does those things, more power to him, and we will be supporting him. But let's see what he does.
Okay. Not only tea bags, but the water we drink and the food we eat. It's crazy. Thank you both very much. We're moving on to an hour, so I guess that pretty well covers the show. Thanks everybody for watching Citizens Forum this week, and see you again next show.